Hello and welcome to the Engineer Your Success, Leadership, and Life Harmony Like a Mother show. I'm your host, Kenya Romanovska, award-winning investigative journalist turned maternity leave and working motherhood strategist and mom of three. And we are here to help you, ambitious STEM mom or corporate mom, turn the motherhood penalty into your greatest advantage. Because when you became a mom, all of a sudden you had two jobs, but not twice. Diana Smith, professional engineer and mama, and she's going to be talking all things career and family life integration. And let me introduce her in more detail. Diana is a partner at Dialogue, and she is a highly motivated mechanical engineer. She leads the mechanical design on buildings ranging from small renovations to large institutions and helps manage the Alberta mechanical engineering teams. She's recognized for her analytical mind, a strong sense of ownership, and approachable leadership style. And she has a keen interest in sustainable design. She unites the interdisciplinary effort required to achieve high sustainability goals. And with a love for projects that positively changes the city she lives in, one of Diana's favorite moments was walking into the Royal Alberta Museum when it first opened and seeing other people enjoying the space she helped design. So welcome, Diana. So that was your professional intro. Can you tell us more about the personal side of things, what you like, what your family looks like, and a few things you enjoy doing outside of work?
For sure. Well, thank you so much for the introduction and thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. So yeah, you talked all about kind of me being a mechanical engineer, but also outside of that, I am a mom, as you mentioned. I'm married. I have a toddler who just turned 3, actually a week ago. And as well, I am pregnant right now and I'm expecting a baby girl in mid-July. So we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, congratulations. That's a big and exciting change for your family.
Thanks. Yes, going from 1 to 2. We'll see how it goes.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us, I mean, we at Pros and Babes, we work with a lot of engineers, and we believe that mothers have a special contribution to make in their profession, a way of thinking, a way of feeling that can ultimately lead to engineering a better world for our families, right? I'm sure whenever you walk around town or you see how roads or buildings or spaces are designed, your mind probably thinks, that could have been done a little bit differently if we were going to be more inclusive of mothers and others, right? So let's talk about that world. Tell us about an engineering project you loved working on and what you love about your engineering career.
Sure. So I guess kind of two things there. How mothers and contribute kind of into our world. We have had a lot of discussions around city building and even just getting a lot of different perspectives. And I think mothers and just females in general are kind of one of those groups. Um, I really recognize when I started walking around with a stroller, even just accessibility, like you mentioned, and trying to get around and just having those experiences really impacts how I now look at different design problems and even outside of, mechanical engineering, but I have an ability to contribute to the overall kind of project picture and be able to bring up some of those things. And then I think even the way that we engage with people and how we get feedback and how we have those kind of conversations with other you might ask different questions and kind of pros the engagement a little bit different than others. So I think that's all really valuable and really important when we're thinking about all these amazing public spaces or private spaces that we're spending a lot of our time in and how it affects a range of different kind of groups of people. Something that for me, being a mechanical engineer and working on buildings, I am a nerd at heart. I really love the technical aspects. I love thinking about sustainability and how we can impact our projects and from that sense. And I've been really, like you mentioned in my intro, been really fortunate to work on a lot of different kind of scales and places of complexities. You talked about the Royal Alberta Museum. That was one that was really impactful for me and my career as well. But just thinking about how many different kind of space types are within that one project.
Mm.
And there's the public kind of lobby space, there's galleries, there's workshops and labs, there's a kitchen in the basement that people might not even know about. And so just being able to touch all of those different aspects, even in one project, was pretty exciting for me.
Yeah, I remember actually, I have a picture where my second son was born, and my husband, who's a teacher, went with his kids on a field trip there. So we met. And I remember, I think, I mean, that those phases can be fuzzy, but even things like inclusive bathrooms, where it's not just expected for women to change your child's diaper, but for fathers to take that on too. I went to a barber shop this weekend with my son, and I know that's probably not the first place where you think mothers would go with babies, but I'm like, where do I change my daughter? Right on the chair, right? So there's small details like that that ultimately add up to our experience. Or when I think of when I go to malls, because when I was a new mom, I wanted to get out a lot more. Now that I have three kids and my business, I've designed my life in spaces that would be comfortable. But think about the nursing spaces that we have for babies in the women's bathroom. Who would go and
Mhm.
take their lunch in a bathroom? But that's how the space has been designed, so that you hear people in the toilets at the same time you're taking a break with your baby and smelling that. So I am pretty sure that it wasn't a woman who designed that space for.
Just thinking through your day, exactly, and how what other spaces are you going to need, and what are the facilities you might need, and yeah, I think it's it it's always shocking to me when we go out somewhere as a family and there isn't a change table in the men's washroom, and so I think having more, either gender neutral or kind of inclusive spaces are just gonna help so many different people and depending on where they're at in their lives.
Yeah, I think we're just getting started. Even when we think about the profession of engineering, it's relatively new in history that there are women in that profession, right? It's been only a few decades, and even then, the participation numbers are still well lower compared to men for so many different reasons. So, can we expand more about how you think specifically mothers who are engineers contribute your unique value in your stream of work?
Yeah, I think that's where thinking through those day-to-day tasks and thinking about things that might not have been originally in kind of the program areas, and that's a bit of a blend, but across different disciplines. But being able to suggest, if it's in an office space or and they might be needing a nursing station or something like that, if for someone who's come back earlier and from their parental leave, that could be an example. I think on even the mechanical specific side of things, when we're designing different temperatures and thinking about control and thermostats and how are things laid out and what are those set points going to be, understanding that there are different ways of experiencing the space and different thermal comforts for people, and being able to have that control can be really important for various groups, balancing, of course, cost, sustainability, all of the other aspects that we're always dealing with within engineering.
Yeah. I think I would know the answer to my next question, but maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. When you think about your own training as a mechanical engineer, were you encouraged to reflect on how different people, for example, mothers, this is the subject of this podcast, might experience the end design? So you gave a couple of technical examples, but did you have the chance to reflect on that in engineering school? Of one day I might be a mother, I might be designing things that might impact mothers or other groups of people. Was that lens even brought to the reflection?
I don't think so. I can't recall a moment of time other than just saying, here's the general range. We use a lot of different guidelines and standards based more on the space type, I would say, if it's a laboratory or if it's a school, but not always dealing with the specific different groups coming into those spaces. So it is an interesting concept, even thinking through when you're looking at your design of your different buildings.
Yeah, and when you think of maybe young women and even men in school who might be listening to this podcast at some point, what do you think you would like them to reflect on now that we have more, well, we have more diversity in the workplace. It's not what it used to be even 50 years ago, where or 60 years ago, where men would go to work and women would be at home. There are a lot of women with young children entering the workspaces, sometimes coming back from parental leave early. So what are some things they can think about through their education, and how they design their deliverables, interact with people?
Yeah, I think trying to put yourself in others' shoes and where you don't maybe see that perspective around the table, being more intentional about engaging with those different groups of people and that diversity and trying to bring them into the project and understanding what they may bring to the table. We, like I mentioned, it is quite technical, and so there are a lot of typical design standards that you would adhere to and based on a lot of research, but also how that gets implemented and giving the users, I think the biggest thing for me, especially on a mechanical standpoint, is really the control of one space because your equipment will react to whatever you set it. Those, if it's a temperature or whatever the set points are, but just being able to actually enforce that and have the ability to control your space, I think that would be really important.
Absolutely critical. Yeah. So you are preparing for a big transition in your life, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the first child, I would say, is probably the biggest adjustment. You're making all of these decisions for the first time. And it's a significant transition in a professional life. It's not only for a mother, but for a father too, right? You are redefining how you're going to live your days and your responsibilities and your sleep and your nutrition and the whole family's identity. So you have a chance, you're a partner at your firm, right? And you are respected. What would you like to model for women engineers who have not started their families yet through your choices about parental leave, right? We may not know it, but people are watching, people are looking to role models. And I know that you are a role model to others. So what kind of signals would you like to send to other women and men who are thinking, oh, Diana's going on parental leave. I will look with curiosity and see what I can learn from her experience.
It's been interesting this time around. I've had a lot more questions about how the length of time I'm planning to take off. And I think part of that is because of being a partner at our firm. And I want to show that it is possible to both have a career and have a family. And that can be really challenging at times. And sometimes you're feeling like you're constantly juggling a million different balls at once. And there's been a lot of different analogies, but one that I like is that sometimes you have to let a ball drop, and some are glass and some are actually plastic, and they're more resilient, and it's okay, and things are going to kind of pick up. So that's not even necessarily on going on parental leave, but just in general, trying to balance all of your different responsibilities. So I'm planning to take 12 months of parental leave, and there's a lot of work to do to prepare for that. But I'm spending a lot of time right now in my final couple months just trying to set up the team for success so that they're well taken care of while I'm away, as well as my other partners as best I can. And so putting in other people in place, just building up relationships and communication and talking through that. And when I think about my overall career, the 12 months, it feels like a long time right now, but it's really just a blip. And I still have a long career ahead of me that I'm also really excited about and passionate about. And that's still going to be there when I come back. And I know everyone will be uh, in a good place even while I'm away. And that doesn't deter anything from me. It just means that we're stronger because we're a team and we're able to cover for each other during those moments when someone needs to take a leave for whatever reason it is. And that's going to look different for different people. Some um, moms take a shorter period at a time and they jump back into your career, and some take longer. Some will take that full kind of 18 months. And so I think just what's really important is communicating that with whether it's a supervisor, a team member, your peers, just explaining what's right for you and explaining what you want to engage in if there is anything during that time away. Um, because it will look different for each person, and being able to accommodate that is really valuable in different companies.
Yeah. When you think about your upcoming parental leave, how would you like to feel during that time?
I it's I would like to feel just content is the word that comes to mind, because there's going to be, and I use that pretty broadly because every day is different, every hour is different. Um, but sometimes there's just a lot of stress and you feel like you need to do so many different things. And just being, okay with wherever I'm at in that particular moment, um, is something that I'm still striving for. And I'm also looking forward to being able to focus in on the family time over this next kind of upcoming year. And because I have spent a lot of time in my career and with my company and balancing a number of different things. And you've talked about, I've heard Kenya even seasons and acknowledging different seasons of our lives. And I thought that was so powerful in thinking about, okay, what season am I in right now? Is it a high? Is it a low? Do I have time to breathe? And am I going 1,000 miles an hour? Or where am I at right now? And so just being able to be in the moment and be recognizing that I'm in this particular kind of season is something that I'm looking forward to on my upcoming parental leave that really struggled with my first, because it was a big shock going from that 100% kind
Yes.
of career, everything's about just me, and then having to take care of someone else in a more dramatic way.
Yes, I remember that. Can you tell me more about your first leave and how you experienced it? That
For
whole
sure.
identity transition?
Yeah, it was an identity crisis. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know I had a different expectation of even productivity. I thought, okay, it'll be hard for a little while, and then maybe I'll take a course on the side, or maybe I'll be able to do all these home projects that I had been putting off for a while. And if I just went through my day and had spent that quality time with my son and maybe did a 10-minute yoga class and perhaps put a dish away, that was a good day. And so just having those different expectations and thinking through what that means and how you value kind of that whole productivity, I think that's something that engineers in particular probably struggle with maybe more, because we are so kind of structured and very analytical, and I'm very much an action oriented person, and so I would, even subconsciously make a to-do list and then feel guilty if I didn't accomplish it all. And that was really hard on my first, and it took a few months, I would say, even kind of going through that and starting to give myself more of that grace.
Mm. So many women experience that. And it's funny when I think about when I rolled out the Mom Bee program a couple of years ago, I had a huge influx of engineers who registered for the program. It was during COVID, and I was like, why is that? Why are these engineers so attracted to what I'm doing? Oh, it's because I wrote a process manual for motherhood. And they love the
We
process,
love
right?
manual.
Yeah, there's a process manual. And so this whole approach of season designing the calendar. I have 3 kids. I have a 5-month-old right now. I took about a month of maternity leave because she was born around Christmas. And I have my business, I mean, is not huge, right? There's me and some support staff that I have. But right next to me right now on my wall, I've mapped out 12 months worth of calendars, and I'm deciding how do I want to feel next year. I have seasons of push and seasons of pullback, and then there are even in those seasons of push, I need breathers, right? So it's a whole design, it's architecting what I want. And I am starting to crave a little bit more of that spaciousness because work picked up more than I expected in the season. And I am craving that now, that just simply taking a step back. And I think we have more power than we think, but we have to be willing to take a step back and embrace that desire and embrace that reflection. Like, what is it really that I want? Not what my parents expected of me to be, right, as a professional, not what society as a whole, not necessarily just my husband or even my children, but like quiet down and think, what is it that I'm craving, right? And in career, often it's the getting it done, solving problems, connecting with people. And then in the home sphere, we may seek that connection and maybe that more quiet excitement or that flow or that support, so we can not worry about the mess at home, right?
Yep.
So it starts with engineering from a place of feeling and desire. And that's why I asked you, how do you want to feel during that parental leave? It's not just what you want to do, but how do you want to feel? And you said that feeling contentment. That's a very nice word. I've heard a few professionals say that, and it's like, it's peaceful, but it's joyful. It's this.
Yeah, it's not, and it sometimes it seems sub-average, but it's just about being okay in the place that you're at, right? And that can be very joyful at the same time. I'm
Yes.
curious with your schedule, how do you incorporate flexibility? Like how do you adjust when something comes up that's unexpected? Because I think that's something that we always struggle with as well.
That was a significant learning curve. I've been doing different versions of calendar planning for the year. And what I did last year is I incorporated buffer blocks. So, and because life happens, sickness happens, events happen, dealing with drama. So I did quite a comprehensive list that I'm still updating of everything I do in the different areas of my life, time estimates, and then I would see if the math added up. What are my expectations of how I want to spend time versus how many hours there are actually in a year and a quarter? And that gave me some really useful data. And essentially, about 20 to 25% of my time are logistics buffers. So
Mm,
if I give you a structure, let's say I have different calendar rules, but I put most of my important work between Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's my business development, client facing work. And then most of my admin, financial planning, logistics are on Mondays and Fridays. And I build in, like, Monday afternoon is that logistics block for, and Friday I have a bit of that too, so that if somebody's sick, or all of that, then I can more easily reschedule, right? And another thing I've done, I know not everybody has the luxury to do that, but I stopped having meetings before 10 a.m. because if there's a sick child or somebody, and that happens, then that gives me time to craft a plan, and I can move a few meetings in the morning. And then at worst, my husband can take the afternoon off if I have something, very, very pressing that I have a hard time canceling, or I can take care of my children in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I can put on a show that's educational, right? And then
mhm.
we split it. And I do the same thing for the last week of the month. I have a pattern there, which is more of my planning and strategic month. And there's a couple of buffer blocks. So I account for that disruption already in the project planning of my life. Whereas when I was single, I expected to be able to fill 40 hours of a work week with work. So
Yep.
that's the breathing space, building that in has been huge. And then I run this session called Sick Days Planning. So I still want to refine that, but I can have a general plan for sick days so that we're not caught off guard. I can order these little kits for my kids, right? And like I'll buy a couple of boxes of little Legos or something interesting that I can take out on a sick day so that I have a buffer in case they need to be home. And then we can enjoy that time, setting an intention. Like, how do you want to be present for your kids when they're sick? Sometimes it's the days they remember the best, right? Mom made me chicken soup, and
Yeah.
so I strategically plan for that in advance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's really valuable, and I think that can be applied even to, yeah, like you said, just work in general, because I often make a to-do list and it helps me stay organized and it helps me keep track of things, but I don't always do the best job at putting in that flex time or putting in the buffers for when someone asks you a question or another meeting pops up or you have to go and address something. So I love that idea of building in those buffers, because I think that just helps you feel like you've still accomplished that ongoing to-do list, but haven't completely stressed yourself out when there's a few things at the end of the day because you have that time.
Well, and that's the big difference is instead of having the to-do list, it's I front load my calendar in terms of how I want to feel and what I want my schedule to look like. And that keeps from some things even getting on my to-do list because I have more of an architecture. I start with a big picture, the seasons in life, and then I drill down to 5-year seasons more or less, right? And then 1 year and even quarterly, and design around what matters in each season. I've noticed working with professionals is we're in such a rush to cram everything into a year. But why? We don't need to accomplish every single project in the next 12 months. And I started giving myself more years to actually accomplish some things that I thought that would take less time. And that reduces the pressure and it reduces the hours and the number of days. And I always build in seasons of slowdown. Like right now, it's quite busy and rich. And I have a season of slowdown coming up. I'm like, all right, I have a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm bracing myself. It's a little bit tougher than usually, but there is a moment to reset and to recalibrate, right? So that's how I go about it. Yeah. We're not taught that in school, but we have to design that formula for ourselves.
Exactly. Well, and it's a continuing learning, and I think there's always time to learn and find new tools, and whatever is going to help you in the moment that you're in is great.
Yeah, those buffer blocks. I was speaking to a pretty senior engineer last Friday, and she said, I think even the best, most oiled Toyota style teams, she says your hands and tools time is 50% of the time at best, right? So, and then the rest of the time it's planning. I mean, it's dealing with stuff, and we have to account for that as mothers. There's always something, and there's always dealing with problems, emotional situations, whether it's from our kids or other family members, like there's a death in the family or there's an illness, right? You can't plan to be productive
Mhm.
like you're full time. It's otherwise you're always going to be catching up. So buffer blocks, all about the buffer blocks.
Buffer blocks, and you just reminded me of another piece with motherhood bringing to even careers, or that notion of multitasking, or that motion of dealing with a lot of different things and being able to prioritize. And um, I think that's a very valuable skill set. So even when you do go on parental leave, you're still building up skills that you can then
Yes.
bring back to your workplace and bring back to your career in a different way.
100%. And I encourage people to, well, that's where the identity shift comes in, is to see those skills. So you
Exactly.
asked about how do I plan my schedule? It's it's rooted in something deeper. It's a new identity. And right now, the one that I'm playing with and that has been extremely helpful is I see myself, first of all, I like to get into a neutral identity where I don't judge a situation, whether it's my kids' tantrums or work or life, right? So neutrality. And then I like to get into the identity of a person who feels supported, but internally, right? So whatever happens, I have this meditation at night and I connect with both my masculine and feminine energy and have that internal supported energy. And then there's the identity of a person who's expecting good things to happen. So that's beyond the label of being a mother. It's my identity as a human. And I find that when I embrace that, no matter what life throws at me, if I recenter into that, I can always find a way through things. Whereas I think as moms, we can get into this very frenetic, overwhelmed energy. And that just transpires into everything. And our kids feel it, our spouses feel it, our colleagues feel it. And that's not how we want to move through our day, right? So that identity recalibration is huge. Speaking of which, though, we can get stuck in these issues as if it was just a woman's issue, where we know it's not. It's not. We can have all the best schedules in the world and do all the identity rewiring and do all the leaning in and hire all the help. But at the end of the day, we didn't create these babies by ourselves. It took right? A partner. And so, if we get into a conversation, let's talk about men and fathers in this instance. What shifts would you like to see in men's and fathers and other engineers' mindsets when it comes to work structures, policies, and recognizing the role of partner of mothers? Because research shows that motherhood often comes with a penalty, financial and career. For fathers, it can come with a fatherhood premium. And the idea of men taking parental leave is pretty novel. In some environments, it's encouraged, but in some places, it's still taboo. So, what would you like to see shifting in your environment?
I think there is a shift that's happening already, but we're just at the beginning of it. I think you're right in saying it's different. Some men taking parental leaves in some areas are really celebrated, and others are kind of questioned a little bit. And I think there's still a really big mindset shift for men to do that. And even thinking through, well, all of a sudden they have to ask themselves these questions. Well, what happens to my work while I'm on parental leave? And they're having all these things that women have had to go through for quite some time. But I think it's so valuable celebrating and sharing those family responsibilities, because I think that's how we get to a better place in the future, and that's how we just acknowledge sharing the home life responsibilities with the career lives. Like, that's going to um, one, give more time to the mothers to be able to spend on their career and get back into it. And then also give a little bit of kind of perspective, and something that I've really appreciated around the partners table in Edmonton, where I'm located, is that there are other people, men and women, with young kids, and so we have more open discussions about, what ability we have to attend every single event or conference, and even that scheduling around different things, and being a little bit more adaptable and saying, well, maybe it's a lunch meeting instead of a late evening meeting because people have family responsibilities. I think that's really huge. Even for myself, something that I realized only within the last year or two is my team had thrown me this amazing, very lovely baby shower. And then we had another team member who was male and he was expecting a baby, and we weren't treating it in the same way. And I thought, oh, wow, that is really interesting, something that I'm advocating for, and not even conscious of myself. And it was actually at a different conference that I had learned more about this. And so then, yeah, we pulled together. We had some baby shower gifts, and we kind of talked about it. And so I think if we're expecting all of that from men, we also have to kind of shift it and say that we're celebrating all parents and not only mothers, and that's a piece that we can do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an engineer, a mom of three. You know, you and I met at an
Yes.
event, right? And I mentioned her. She's designed concept towel that is meant to encourage and celebrate all parents, and the companies who adopt the program, the parent can claim their gift. Maybe they may not be ready to reveal that they're expecting for whatever reason, right? Whatever gender they are. And so I thought that was really neat. When I talk about engineering the world like a mother, that's just
Mhm.
one way where, when we decide to create and to invent and to do something new, as mothers, we're reshaping the fabric of society. So there's definitely some ways to go. And I'm starting to hear more from men like, hey, Kenya, the work you're doing, can you do that with my husband? And so we're
Yeah,
starting to support men through the identity shifts into fatherhood, and what that means for them. Because I don't know if you've read the book Outlive by Peter Attia, but there's a whole chapter on emotional health and longevity, right? And how men struggle with anger and emotional issues. And I think as women, we like to gather and talk about these things, but for men, often it's just something that's repressed. And the identity of man as a breadwinner and who's there to support his family, that has shifted tremendously now that men negotiate schedules with their partners, right? Or with their kids. Even my husband was telling me that, and he did a keynote, and I realized how profound of a shift it is for them. But there's not necessarily a forum to acknowledge all those changes, right?
for sure. And I think even going to some of these forums or conferences or things, I think there's a place for it being where it is majority women, and you're learning other tools and everything else. But we really need those allies, and we really need that shift. We need to be able to bring men into the conversation as well if we're going to move the needle on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So to pivot a bit into a couple of years ago, what would you have told your younger mom self if you knew what you know now about being a mother, an engineer, a partner, everything?
I One of the things I'd say is whatever you're struggling with in that particular moment, it will pass. And in the moment it can feel really awful, but and you need to give yourself the grace to feel those feelings, but it will change. And I think of a couple of points for me personally is when I first had my son, I definitely experienced some baby blues. I already talked a little bit about that identity crisis and understanding kind of what the value of my time was and where I was spending it. And then eventually that phase did pass, and I was able to kind of come out of it and had a lot of support. Another thing that we have experienced in the last couple of years is my son going through a bit of a daddy phase. And I know I have other friends who have gone through this too. And it is really crappy at the time, and you just think, "I'm doing everything I can, and why is he only worried about my husband, and you start second guessing all of your actions and any kind of moment that you're spending away from your family. I was really overanalyzing, and eventually that phase 2 passed, and now it comes up every once in a while, but then he goes through a mommy phase for a week, and just seeing that has really helped me be able to deal with those daddy phases when they do come up, because I know it's going to change again. And just actually, I didn't it was so hard at the time, but until I could actually experience that, I didn't realize that there would be that light at the end of what felt like a very long dark tunnel.
I so relate to that. When I became a mom, that first year, and even the first two, I'd say 3 years, were so difficult. My son had severe eczema and allergies, and now I understand. It's funny, after I had my daughter, now my skin started being so much more sensitive and itchy
Oh
with
yeah.
creams, and I realized like how uncomfortable he was in his little body for so many months, right? But I felt like for the first year, even two, I was always with him. I was making a choice between going to the bathroom or eating, and it felt lonely. My parents weren't here in Edmonton with me, and there's so many times where I was crying and waiting for my husband to come home from work, or I would be sick and he would be sick, and I just was alone. And I thought, is this it? Is this what life is going to
This is my
feel
life now.
right? Like, is that my future? It was so jarring, but it did pass. And now the son is 7 years old, and he's so helpful. He unpacks the dishwasher and helps with the laundry, and he's out there gallivanting with some friends, and it's a completely different chapter. But in the beginning, it was tough. It was tough. Right. And I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. So I can relate to what you're saying. And I wish I had a little bit more compassion for myself and a bit more patience, and say, like, Kenya, this is a season. But we,
Mm.
don't, we didn't necessarily get those role models. And our parents came of age at a time without the internet, or with like different expectations of what it would be to even have a family and a career. Right. So thank you. Thank you for that. It brings me back to some tender moments.
Yeah, and acknowledging that there's going to be hard moments in the future too, but hopefully being able to recognize that that too will pass, or that too is a phase, and see kind of the ups and downs and take it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you think about engineers who are mothers, where do you think they still struggle the most when it comes to mindset, the mental load, the career plans, and seeing their own value in the workplace?
Similar to what we were saying earlier, yeah, that value and productivity, and setting maybe too high of expectations, and then if you don't meet them, feeling that guilt at the end, and whether that's you're at home and you're thinking about work, or you're at work and you're thinking about at home, and always feeling like you're not spending enough time at either. I think that is always still a challenge. And I think it's still true that mothers do take on more of the mental load, and maybe that's just a skill set of being able to multitask, or think about the priorities, or think a little bit further ahead than the upcoming day, and what else needs to be planned. So that can be a challenge, but talking through that, I know there's a lot of tools and workshops that you can do out there that are trying to assist with that, and try to communicate with your partner about what that means, and what you need them to do and help and contribute to the relationship and to the family is really important. Um, Career plans, I think, is still it can be a challenge, especially if you don't see leaders that are mothers, or females, and how you can get there. It can often feel like you're climbing an uphill battle, but that as well is just being talked about more often, and we're talking more about diversity and all the value that diversity brings, and there's a lot of energy going behind that. And so I do think we're at a pivotal point right now, and it's getting better, but we're still in that journey.
That what you're talking about, setting really high expectations for yourself, I see that as particularly acute in engineering professions, because you do, from what I remember, the ring with little
Yeah,
line, it reminds
yeah,
you to that there's people's lives at stake, right? At the end of the day, is that it with the ring? When you're writing,
yeah.
it's
We have
supposed
the
to, yeah, it's supposed to remind you of the responsibility you have, right?
yeah,
And I mean, you're designing infrastructure that people are going to use and be in. And if the job is done poorly, then, well, people could suffer, right? So I've seen that mindset translated into parenting, where sometimes the stakes are not as high. Not every single decision is a life or death decision. And to be able to take a step back and give yourself grace and know that you don't need to figure everything out on your own, and being in that mindset of I'm supported, right? I'm doing well. That self mentorship is absolutely critical and key. Um,
Yes.
yeah, go ahead.
I completely agree, and like you said, giving yourself the ability to say, well, okay, maybe they didn't eat their vegetables tonight, but that's okay. We'll get them tomorrow. Or yes, I had to put on hopefully an educational, but maybe not always TV show in the moment just so that I can do these other things or get dinner ready. And it was it's not always going to be perfect all the time, and that's okay. And we're all just trying to do the best that we can. And your kids are not going to remember that one night that they didn't have vegetables. They're going to remember how much love and support that you showed them.
Speaking of which, vegetables, I have to share how I've been able to get more veggies into my son, who's a little bit more selective. One loves fruits and veggies, there's another one that's more picky. But I make a smoothie that's spinach, broccoli, wild cherries, and I put some chocolate powder in there and cinnamon and vanilla. And lo and behold, I can get a full cup of green vegetables into my son.
Love that. Sneak it
Different
in.
flavor. Yeah. It's that combination. I found little combinations of the dark cherries or pineapple with the greens, and then you add some cocoa powder into it, and all of a sudden you've got a vegetable eater. So, I'm really,
Fantastic.
yeah, I'm really pleased with myself when it comes to that. So I'm putting, the broccoli on the plate, but hey, you know what? You do what you can. So
Exactly. With the small wins.
the small wins. Well, it's a big win. That's a big
That's
one.
a big win. You're right. It's not even small. It's a big win.
So we'll slowly be wrapping up our conversation. I shared a wheel of life with you, and I'm wondering, where do you see the most opportunity for growth in the pillars of your life when it comes to your own mindset or your relationships, your personal brand, career, life integration, all of that? Where would you like to, as you're expecting your next child, where would you like to lean in or set some intentions for yourself that can blossom over time?
I am really good at telling other people to give themselves grace and give yourselves the need to recharge and be flexible. And I think that's just in general an area that I could use some growth myself. And whether that's getting more sleep in the evening or overnight. And um, it was really interesting. This just came up on Friday. I had a moment where I was really spiraling and upset about something that with my son, and feeling like I was taking too much time at work and not spending enough time with him. And I reached out to have some conversations with some other mothers in high performing careers, and had some really amazing feedback. And so leaning on that support system when I need it too is really valuable. And um, I got the support. There was a lot of comments on, at the end of the day, he knows you love him, and you're showcasing a different way of being a mother, and that's what he's going to know, and it's really impactful. So I think just coming back to that, um, being gentle on yourself and understanding each day is different, each week is different. For me, even acknowledging that you can't look at things in just a day or just a week's time. You have to look at it further out, whether it's a month or a year, and think about kind of that average and what's happening over the whole span, because it's impossible to do it all in any one shorter time frame.
Yeah.
And so the kind of high and low seasons that you talked about was really eye opening. I really like that. And so I think just kind of a gentler criticism of myself, and working through some of those periods is where I would like to spend some focus over the upcoming months and year.
Yeah, there's this question I love to ask moms with careers is why are you working? And you may not have that answer today. Why you're working beyond a paycheck is a very powerful one because it allows us to actualize in this world in some capacity. But I remember an extremely powerful moment. It was 6.5 years ago when I launched Pros and Babes, and I was doing this as a hobby. I used to do in-person sessions with moms on maternity leave who wanted to talk about careers. And I was doing an exercise that wasn't working out at all. I had them do a visualization, but the kids were yanking their hair. And I was like, oh, Kenya, how are we going to save this session? And I said, you know what? Open your eyes. Let's just talk. And I asked, well, imagine yourself on a beach in 25 years and your kids are graduating from home life. What are they saying about you? That was so emotional because these moms were with these tiny little babies, new moms, when the Kleenex went out and all of a sudden we talked, well, if they were going to say three things about you, remembering how they grew up, how they saw you as a mom with a career, what would you like them to remember? And that was a pivotal moment for me. I reflected on what do I want my kids to remember? I have memories of my mom who had a demanding career. She flew to Hong Kong and China and Brazil and Russia and was absent for certain periods and sometimes took us. And I learned a lot from her. I learned about money. I learned about expectations of myself. So I thought, why not do that with intention? I'm coming of age as a mom at a different time. And now when I design the seasons or when things get a little bit more busy, I go back to those statements I wrote for myself. Like, ultimately, what will they say about me? And I make sure every year when I do my calendar planning to layer that in to make sure the experiences we design or the time I spend with them are in alignment with what I hope they will say about me. And yesterday we were in bed at night. It was Mother's Day, and my son said, Mom, you are absolutely perfect. You are the perfect mom. And like he started
Aww.
things, and I was like, do you really think that? And he said, yeah, and it's aligned with the intentions that I'm bringing to the table. So for anybody wondering about, am I doing things right? Am I working too much? Am I making the right choices? Think, engineer the future, and imagine that scene in your mind, right? And what are the things that your kids will remember about you? And then throughout the seasons, you can weave that in. You can have seasons where you push in your career, but you can have seasons where you pull back as well. And that's fine if you can give yourself that inner peace that you're designing it like a mother, even though you may not have seen role models before you. And Diana, the reason I brought you on the podcast today, when I met you at this networking event, you had this sense of calm and peace and confidence about you. And I thought I would love to showcase what you have to say to other engineers who may be lacking those role models or are wondering if they're going to pull out. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us, your journey, anecdotes, reflecting with me, asking questions. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience of moms who are engineering their success, leadership, and life harmony like mothers today?
Just that there is a community out there, and there are lots of people kind of going through this and finding your people and being able to have that support system, whether it's family, whether it's other peers, is really impactful. So I really encourage, if you're feeling lonely, or kind of reach out and join either a group or start talking to other people about it, because chances are that they're also going through something similar, and you're not as alone as it may feel in the time, and that it is possible to do both, have a family and have a really successful career and be passionate about that career and love what you do and talk about it and in kind of equal stance with having a family, and just really want to keep promoting that for everyone.
I love that. That's wonderful. And for those of you who are listening online and you want to get updated about these podcasts and conversations like I'm having with Diana today, you can sign up for our mailing list on prosandbabes.com. So you'll get weekly updates about our conversations and summaries of our conversations. And as well, find us on LinkedIn and our Facebook group for our monthly STEM Mom workshops or our Working Mom Manual workshop, where you will get to network and ask those questions and find community if you're feeling alone or stuck on your working motherhood journey. Diana Smith, professional engineer and mom, thank you so much for joining us today. I will see you backstage in just a moment.
Thank you so much for having me.